Hi, my name is Colleen Myers. I'm a recovering judgmental church lady, and I'm glad you've joined me for this episode of the Smack Dab podcast, living smack dab in the center of God's will. My husband and I do a lot of driving for our ministry work that we do, and we often get into some pretty deep theological conversations, and I just thought I would share a little snippet of a conversation that we ended up getting into the other day while we were on the road. We were talking about how us humans are we were created to worship. There is something that God placed in us, this desire to worship, and we can see how the enemy has twisted that into tempting us to worship other things or other people besides the one that we should be worshiping, which is Jesus himself. And as we talked about this, my husband said something that it really struck me. He said, when people who were created to worship end up becoming worshiped, it does something to them. It almost like does something to their DNA or something. It's like it's so foreign to how God created us and the purpose that he created us for, to worship him, that when we become worshiped as a human being, it twists us. It does something. It's not healthy. It's really pretty bad what it does to us. And yet the enemy tempts us to either worship anyone else or anything else besides God, or tempts us to want to be worshiped. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that today and kind of dive into this a little bit. That the Bible's very clear that the glory belongs to God and that we're merely to be vessels pointing to him. So in Acts 14:11-15, people were trying to worship Paul and Barnabas, and they refused to be worshiped, and they redirected the praise back to God. It says, but when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard that people were worshiping them, they tore their clothes and rushed out into the crowd shouting, "Friends, why are you doing this? We too are only human like you. We are bringing you good news. So we're just humans like you. We're not the ones to be worshiped. Only God is the one to be worshiped." And then here's another concept about how he is the only one that should be worshiped, or another scripture verse that relates to this, that he's the only one that we are to make great. John 3:30, he must become greater, I must become less. So we're to make a big, huge deal about him and a real little deal about ourselves. John the Baptist knew that his role wasn't to be the spotlight, but to shine it on Jesus. And then in Isaiah 42:8, God says that he shares his glory with no one. God alone deserves worship and glory. We're called to point all the attention onto him. Isaiah 42:8 says, I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another, or my praise to idols. And then 1 Corinthians 10:31 tells us, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Even in the small things, we're to live to glorify God, not ourselves. And my husband and I talked about this as we were driving along. We talked about the instances where we've even been in situations before where people have wanted to put us up on a pedestal because we're the rave ministry people that, have this, what they would call a successful ministry to do rave outreach for the last 16 years. And I may have shared this story before on this podcast. I can't remember, but there was even one time where we went into this life group that we were part of this life group at this church on the mountain where we live. And we hardly ever get to go to things like that because we're out of town so much. But we were in town and we wanted to reconnect with our life group. And so we showed up, and when we walked in the door, the leader of the life group was like, Rob and Colleen are here. This is awesome. It's like love has walked through our door, and like wisdom has walked through our door, and we're going to have them join us tonight in our Bible study, and this is so exciting cuz they're going to bring such a great element of wisdom to our study tonight. And Rob and I looked at each other, and what they didn't know was that we had been in this argument all the way there in the car, and there were raised voices at each other in our car on the way there. And it just seemed so awkward to know that we had, had this argument on the way, and then just kind of like tried to kiss and make up before we walked into this life group. And then here they're saying that these loving, awesome, wise people are walking through their door. And I just, neither of us wanted to let that go. And I just blurted it out. I said, I think you've got the wrong impression of us and are putting us up a little too high on a pedestal, because we argued all the way here. And we just tried to quickly, make it up before we walked in. So we're not all that in a bag of chips. We're just like you guys. We're just trying to survive, and our marriage is not perfect by any means, and our lives are not perfect. So we're just going to be one of you guys tonight, and we're looking forward to getting some wisdom from you, because we are not the bearers of wisdom to this group. We're coming here because we need you people in our lives, and we need to hear from you. So we just sort of leveled the playing field right away, and they were gracious to us, and it turned out to be a great night. But that's the kind of thing that I picture happening, that really should happen. If people start putting us up on a pedestal, I think we need to be real vulnerable with them, and just say, thanks for the compliment, but it's not really truly that way. And only any wisdom or goodness that comes from me really comes through me from the Lord. It's not mine to own. And we need to constantly be turning anything good that people are focusing on in us, and turn that back to the Lord, and just say it's His grace in my life that allows me to have any wisdom at all. And I've remembered in the past hearing some stories of green rooms. So I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but people will talk about these celebrities that if they've had any interaction in a green room, which is like sort of, I picture it like a holding room for the celebrity before they're ushered out onto the stage. And someone was talking to me about being in a green room one time with a Christian worship artist, a worship leader that was very famous. And they were saying that they would contact um, the star, the celebrity, ahead of time, and ask what they wanted in their green room. And so they could have any kind of beverage they wanted. They could have books there to read. If they wanted a certain kind of music playing, they could determine what temperature they wanted the room to be while they were waiting to go on stage. And someone was mentioning being in a green room of this Christian music artist, and how shocking it was, the list that was on their requirements for their green room. And it was just kind of shocking, because they were a Christian, and they were asking for all this special stuff, and everything had to be just right. And they had the staff of this green room a little on edge and nervous, because their list was so particular. And I just thought, wow, that's someone who's gotten used to being worshiped a little bit. And that's someone who's maybe not being the servant leader that God called us to be, and making a big deal about God, and instead of making a big deal about ourselves. Maybe that's a lesson that we've forgotten in this situation. And anyway, it just makes me look at my own life, and I don't want to be that way. And I remember, we run these teams across the country, and we have teams of older moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas that go to share God's love at raves. And I just love being with these people. They've become my closest friends. And that happens when you're in ministry together. A lot of times who you minister side by side with, that becomes your second family, and they become your closest friends. And one of the moms one time in another state mentioned to me that she loved the way that I picked her, even though she was not a close friend at the time. She has become since then, but she was kind of shocked that the leader of this ministry had decided to spend time with her on this outreach. And I picked her to be one of the people on my team that went out that night. We always go in groups, and we stick together, and I had picked her, and she thought that I would pick some of the other ladies that I knew more, that I love hanging out with. And she thanked me for that. And I just gave her a hug and told her that I love getting to know her. And, I went away from that. And when I thought back on that, I just thought how sad that is, that that's what she expected from a ministry leader, that I would just hang out with the people I'm most comfortable with, and that I wouldn't want to bring someone else into my life in a deeper way. And I thought, we need to be humble if we're in places of leadership, at our churches, wherever we are, in our families, in our work. We need to be the humble people that make much about others and make much about God, and don't make much about ourselves. And so I hope that encourages you today to kind of think about that, and think about that green room situation, and what situations in our life are we in where we just are out to get what we want, and we're super finicky and super particular. We have a lot of conference centers and retreat centers, camps on the mountain where we live. And I've interacted a lot with the young people that staff these camps. And I've noticed they've said more than once that these Christian women retreats are often the scariest that they work. When they have a Christian women's retreat renting their conference center facility, they're the most finicky, the most catty, the most I want what I want, and you need to put more ice in my glass. I didn't have enough ice, or my food was lukewarm. Please take it back to the kitchen and make sure it's just right the way I want it. And they actually have said that Christian women's retreats are the scariest events that they serve at. And I thought that should be the ones they look forward to, because we're the most loving, we're the most kind. I just hope that when you and I go about our daily lives, that we're not those people, that we're humble, that we're kind, that when someone does make much about us, that we turn it around and we don't accept that praise, but we turn it around, and we can be gracious and say thank you, but just, I'll just give you a little hint that it's really not me. It's got to be Jesus in me, because I'm not like that. So hopefully we can reframe who we are and who Jesus is as we go about our daily lives, and give others around us the right perspective that it's really Jesus, and that he is great and we are not. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Smack Dab podcast. Be sure to subscribe and check out our latest episodes.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smack Dab podcast. If this has been a blessing to you, please consider helping us continue by making a donation to our sponsor at engagetogoministries.com.